Welcome, everyone, to AI News and Gurus, the show for intelligent distributors. My name is Brian Hopkins, and I'm here with my co-host, Brooks Hamilton, and we're really excited to bring you the next version of the AI News and Gurus. Good afternoon, Brooks. How you doing, man?
Great. Enjoying things here in Austin.
Good to see you again here from the great state of Texas. That's awesome. So what I want to do for the audience again is I just want to make sure that we lay out the kind of show this is. We're really excited that you're here. We got a great guest today. Is the way this show operates is, along with all of the other programs we do at DSG, is we try to educate the distribution world on what we believe is important and what you need to know. And this is centered around AI. So what we'll do is we'll take some of the big news that we believe is important for us to talk about and to think about that's happening within AI in our world. And we'll kind of talk about that from our perspective. So hopefully that brings you some value. And then what we'll do is we bring in a guest. And today we're very excited to have Tracy Duell from Boswick Braun, and he's got a great AI journey to talk to us about. A lot of things that you all are facing. So we're going to make sure that we talk to him and we have a great show. So Brooks, you ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. But before we do, there's one thing that we do have to talk about, and that is the applied AI for distributors. This is a show that you cannot afford to miss. This is the third one that we have in the series, and it's going to be bigger and better than ever. And the reason is we've got an amazing lineup of speakers, from Noel Russell to Trent Gillespie. Both are thought leaders within the AI world. Trent specifically with Amazon to be able to talk a lot about what they've done with AI. And then we have a great lineup of industry experts who are on that path of AI in their world, and they're going to talk to us about how do they go about it? What's working in their world? What's not? What do we have to think about? Including Tracy, who we're going to talk to today. So you'll have a little sneak peek. So please do not miss this show. It's applied for AIdistributors.com. These are selling quickly, so make sure that you sign up today. And as I said, my name is Brian Hopkins. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at DSG. Here with my good friend Brooks, and Tracy will be joining us in just a little bit. So with that being said, what we'll do is kind of talk about one of the big news items that Brooks and I have been discussing lately. And it's really two things. It's Anthropic, who you may have heard this, have come out and said pretty emphatically that these AI-powered virtual employees will begin to enter the workforce within a year, which is huge news, especially for what we have to think about for us as distributors, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So Brooks, what we're seeing here also is the evolution of the intelligence of these AI tools. So you want to talk a little bit about what this chart is showing us and what we think it could mean?
Yeah, you bet. So what we have here is two charts, basically year over year, and along the horizontal axis going from 50 to 160 is IQ range. IQ is an assessment of human intelligence, and 100 is average. So what we saw with a lot of these models last year was, wow, looking pretty smart, definitely coming up the curve in terms of becoming better and better. In just the first 2 months of, or rather 3 months of 2025, we've seen a sea change. And that is that now we have about as many models from these major providers that are above 100 on their IQs as opposed to below it. Where in 2024, we only had models that were just below that average rate. So we see some not just at like 100 or 105, but there are a number that are pushing out much further, over to 120, now 136, I think is the highest. And I think like the very, very highest IQ, typical IQs that we observe out there are 160. And think about those as the people working on specialized physics and
Mhm.
other really smart areas. This all kind of fits into a broader context, which is we are likely to see these models that power agents, and for those agents to begin to do work in ways that we would go about doing some of that digital work as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think this 1 year shift really has pushed the envelope a little bit about what these models can do that it used to require a human. So what I started to think about is what are the impacts for us in distribution, right? So what does it impact if we now all of a sudden have this virtual or AI powered employee? Like, what does that mean for how do you structure it? And then the bigger picture is how do you use them? What are ways you can use them? So I'm curious, Brooks, when you think about managing these virtual AI identities, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, first off, just to make sure that everybody's clear on what we're talking about from terms like agents. Those are, we can kind of think of them as digital assistants that can use tools like Outlook or SQL or a browser. They have memory, so they may be able to access materials that are relevant to the organization, as well as recall what their prior experiences were and whether they were successful or not. Um, and then they can also use a language model to do things like reason and plan. And then if they hit a roadblock, they can develop a new set of activities in order to get around that roadblock. So that's really kind of what an agent is, or is that's what we're seeing out in the market today in many organizations, but not typically that many within distribution. One thing that I think is going to be really impressive to see as we have this come out is we've previously been pretty focused on building functionality like, hey, if I need to enter an order, I have an order entry system. I have another system for warehouse management and so on. Now I think we're going to see some of these agents and applications as well focus much more on the decision flow and process that sits kind of above that system of record level and uses those capabilities that we have in our organization to get tasks done. And top things I think of there is, let's say I have um, a stock out situation. Well, if I do that, I'd probably want to cruise through, see what my inventory levels are, what the differences are, determine whether or not I need to just expedite an order, or is this more of a structural thing where I need to actually just stock up in those parts or items. Um, and then have all of the communication that's necessary that goes along with either shifting some orders around and placement, as well as communication to vendors. And kind of handling all of those things as one set of tasks for an agent or an assistant to help somebody within supply chain get those things done.
And it's a total mind shift for us as distributors, right? We're used to that whole process you described. It is going from one person to the next, to the next, to the next, usually via email or voicemail or whatever it turns out to be. And it winds up being this big, long chain that winds up slowing the customer down at the end. And in this case, now it does that all almost instantly and makes decisions almost instantly. So it forces us now, I think, to start thinking about ways we can start putting these into our businesses.
Yeah,
You know,
I think
we talked about, and you and I were talking a little earlier about, I read an article by Zach Cass literally yesterday And his doctor, of all people, his doctor took their information. He uses one of these agents and it finishes up all its notes. It records all the next meetings and it schedules the next appointments. And it's saving him 3 hours a day. And that's just one practice, one guy.
Wow.
And if we're using that for healthcare data, then we really need to start thinking about and pushing ourselves to think about how do we use this within distribution.
Yeah.
You know, I had this chat, you know, luckily yesterday with Adobe, and I had a billing problem.
Oh, so what was your experience before when you'd go into Adobe to try to work out a billing problem?
It had always been a challenge, right? To try to find a hunt and peck and maybe find a phone number and try to get something done. And I thought this time I'm going to try the chat route.
Yep.
Because I wanted to see how far they progressed. And I literally walked away from that conversation blown away because it felt to me like a human being was on the other end of that chat. And it's an evolution, I think, from where we've been. Everybody knows when you're interacting with a bot, right? It just feels like that. The interactions feel like that.
Yeah.
And now their model is again getting smarter and more human-like in its responses to the point where it felt to me like it was a human being, and I knew it wasn't.
Yeah.
And it solved my problem. It renewed my subscription. It fixed my billing problem. So it did exactly what you described. It went across their organization to fix the problem.
Wow. Wow. I think one of the best customer experiences that I ever had was with USAA for banking. There was a particular like a loan payoff, a mortgage payoff, and the rep stayed with me to call the other company and go through the process with the other company, stayed on the phone, clarified things, and then dropped that one, came back, wrapped it up with me. I was just totally blown away with that level of customer experience. And I thought, well, how can we go about creating that level of seamlessness and easing of friction with so
Yeah.
many other customer experiences?
Yeah, and it goes back to the old, the old adage that we've always in distribution, we've always wanted human to talk to human, and that has served us very well for this many years. And it's something we still take a little bit of pride in, right? That was you pick up the phone, you talk to somebody, you're going to talk to a human being. But there are cases and there are times where customers don't want to have that kind of interaction. So we've got to meet them where they're at, and these tools are now enabling us to do it. So as a distributor, you got to think about what's the best use case for me to use this for? And it's the 10 o'clock at night on your website, answering a question from a guy who's working the late shift. And he doesn't have to worry about, do you have 24-hour service or not? He's able to use one of these agents to figure this problem out. So there's all kinds of technical things and ways we can use them. I think the other thing we got to think about though is how do you onboard them, right? We think about onboarding with regular employee, right? And sit them down, you say, here's the roles, here's your expectations, here's how we're going to train you, here's how we're going to monitor and give you feedback, all those things. I think those still is the roadmap and the way to talk about these AI agents. You still have to have that conversation. What are these things allowed to do, not allowed to do? What's the role?
Yeah. Should we talk about our second piece of nerdery?
Go for it.
Our other article that we saw that was really interesting. It was a paper put out by David Silver and Rich Sutton. David Silver works for DeepMind and led the AlphaGo team. Rich Sutton is a professor at University of Alberta and had kind of the definitive say about how AI should be developed in a like really short essay. It was like 8 paragraphs called The Bitter Lesson. And his point was human experience and design doesn't go anywhere as far as scaling something that's small and simple. And where the two of them, the point that they were making was, hey, we've been through in two phases of how AI works. It is either simulation, like in chess games, try to see what the other person's going to do and simulate it. The second one was age of human feedback. So that's how we got these great chat bots with like OpenAI's ChatGPT. That was really based on training it on the internet of data and then modifying it with human preference about what's good and what's not so good for a piece of feedback. And now what they were calling out was we're about to enter into a third phase, which is they call age of experience.
Mm.
What this means in practical terms is these agents and models are going to learn from their interactions, and context is very going to be key in order to helping them choose the right set of decisions and tools. And the way that they're going to achieve that is one, by learning from others before them, and second, learning from their experience. So context will be king. So if we think about onboarding an agent, boy, I really want to make sure
Yeah.
that they understand my business and my processes, my culture, what's acceptable from the way in which we speak with each other, the hours that we speak, how we go about solving problems. Those are all going to be really crucial items that we're going to need to teach these agents as they begin to be great assistants and also be able to go out and do more of these rote tasks that are available out in the organization.
Yeah, I mean, the old saying of learn by doing, right? That's been an old adage in distribution forever, right? You want to learn how the warehouse works, you get out there and put your boots on and you go, right? You learn by doing, but now these agents can do it almost instantly and continue to get that feedback. So I love where you went with that. That just said, hey, we're going to teach this thing how we behave as a company, right? What's our culture? What do we do? How do we do it? And now the responses you're going to get and how it operates is going to act in that way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it actually will do what you tell it to do. Not sometimes regular employees don't always do that, but this is a great way for these bots now and these agents to be able to learn the organization in different ways. So I think that combined with intelligence is going to make a huge difference for what we do.
Yeah. What we've found in our own usage and testing is um, it's kind of like ask a stupid question, get a stupid answer. But it's a little different than that. So, usually when we go to use a language model and we say, hey, can you put together um, a product description that is going to be, great for customer facing reasons and highlight value props? Well, maybe it goes out there and it just does an okay job. And it really doesn't touch on the things that we find most important. It just kind of skimmed the internet and provided something back. Well, that's understandable. And what we find is when an agent or a language model has a lot of context and is really working off of good examples and prior conversations, the quality that we get back is monumentally higher. But the challenge has been it's hard to equip a language model with all of the context that we want to give it, either due to just we don't want to copy paste all of that stuff. It's really annoying.
Right.
And we might not want to share some of those things with something that's public. But I think we're very quickly going to get to a point where we can share that context across chats and across projects. We can certainly see these being used in more of a team environment. And
Mm-hmm.
that requirement is being reflected in OpenAI's new memory capabilities. And we see some other companies showing up with better memory capabilities. So, I think we're about to see some agents come to the market that have far more context and understand how we do things as opposed to just general purpose responses.
Yeah, hopefully that brings a level of comfort that, hey, now I can use this in my business because it truly does understand.
Agreed.
Awesome. That's a really good discussion. I'm looking forward to how these things progress. But we've got an amazing guest with us right now. Tracy Duell from Bostwick Ron is on the phone with us. And on the phone, my gosh, I'm 1999. He's joined us today, and we are extremely grateful to have him. He is one of the leaders in kind of the AI movement within distribution. So we're happy to have you, Tracy. Why don't you
Glad to
tell
be
us a little bit
here.
about yourself and a little bit about Bostwick?
Sure. Tracy Duell, I am the VP of IT at Bostwick Braun. Bostwick is a very old distributor. They were founded in 1855, and so they started off originally as a hardware distributor. Um, I might have been around the same time Sears and Roebuck started.
Yes.
But been around a while, many iterations, I think. Really more in the last 40 years, grown into being more of an industrial distributor versus hardware. And so that's really what, they're focused on now, fasteners, cutting tools, and the like. So, but a lot of legacy there, a lot of history, something I enjoy. I'm kind of a history buff uh, across the board. So.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your journey into distribution, right? I know you've had experience over a lot of different industries over the last few years. So I'd love to hear how
Yeah.
you got to this place called, the distribution world we all love.
Sure. So, yeah, first half of my career was in financial services. Capital One, Genworth. That was kind of Act One, I guess you could call it. Act Two, I got more into mid-market consulting and advisory work, and just started really working with a diversity of clients, healthcare, engineering, manufacturing, distribution, and I ended up uh, going into a large regional electrical distributor, equipment company. Um, that's literally their name. They were 100 years old too. So, I think back then and when they were founded, that was probably an original name. But, um, you know, went to lead a transformation effort for them, total turnaround on the tech stack and get them in a position to be able to do acquisitions. And so I went in as a consultant, ended up actually kind of falling in love with the company and ended up being the CIO for 5 years there. Um, and so led them through, a lot of that transition and transformation, and then went back into the consulting space. And I've worked with, different companies in the industrial space, but, my, uh, I don't know which is my day job, but I'm also managing partner in a firm called CXO Partners, where we provide interim executive talent. So, shameless plug there. But that's how I came into Bostwick, is they were going through a corporate turnaround uh, initiative, and so new CEO brought in, and myself, whole new executive team, and this was at the beginning of last year. So I've been there coming up on a year and a half almost, working with them, and it's been uh, a lot of fun, a lot of angst, a lot of change, a lot of, both culturally and you mentioned mindset earlier, right? A big part of what we've been doing there. And, took a company that was, you know, probably, not sure where things were going to head to. Now we're positioned to be able to, come from an area of strength, I guess is the best way to put it. And so we're all pretty excited there on the things we have in progress and what's coming down the pike.
Yeah, it's an amazing transformation. That team there has done amazing work to get the place where you're at. And you've done a couple of different AI implementations. And I'm curious, based upon the experience you've had in other industries, and now you've spent a lot of time in distribution, how do you compare our readiness or distribution's readiness to other industries? What challenges do you feel like we're facing and that we're going to need to overcome?
Yeah, you kind of have to look at it from both readiness and deployment, right? Being ready doesn't necessarily mean you're deploying. Ready this is just figuring out if you are ready, right? So I would say in distribution, that AI readiness is it's moving at a good moderate pace. And it's because you can't look anywhere and not hear about AI, right? I mean, that's everywhere. Um, Adoption and deployment is emerging, but I think it's accelerating now. And much like that graph that you showed 1 year to the next, right? Earlier, same thing. And it's kind of interesting is that while I do feel like distribution as a whole, is moving and, coming, getting their head through the clouds, so to speak. There's still some distributors that are just coming out of on-prem ERP systems,
Right.
and going to a cloud-based solution. But what they're being tackled with right now is they have to, at the same time, they have to look at AI. So it's no rest for the weary for the, they just went from, very old legacy stuff to a cloud-based structure. And oh, by the way, you now also have to understand how AI is going to move the company, going forward. So yeah, it's interesting. Um, Comparatively to other industries, financial services and healthcare and consumer goods, you actually kind of touched on, two of those in the discussion earlier, right? Your Adobe example,
Yeah.
consumer good. They've led the pack in both, fashions, but yeah, you kind of got to break things down though a little further, you know, particularly distribution, right? So you've got the advanced guys, you know, the Amazons, the Grangers, the whomever, and then you have the middle market space, and then you have an even smaller set of distributors, right? And I would venture to say if you took, and I haven't seen a study, but it would be an interesting one. There's probably one out there, but if you did a viability kind of study on just adoption across different AI disciplines, but broke it down between, large, middle market, and small, you would see varying degrees of viability scores, I think, between, those three. So that to me is very telling. How do the smaller, players and the middle market players take advantage of scale, right? And it's always been a time equation, right? You kind of have to wait for things to become affordable, to be available. The bigger, more advanced, players can go out and be on the leading edge, of technology, and that's always a cycle, right?
Yeah, right.
But
It feels like a lot of the tech vendors that that we interact with are starting to move down market.
yeah,
Right. They've started off to go after the 1 billion and plus, but now there's a lot of solutions out there that, the small to mid-sized guys can still get involved with now and
yeah.
equalize themselves.
Well, it's been interesting just over time, right? And I call it kind of in business IT, there's been this consumerization, right? Um, the ability to go out and, plug your credit card number in and you have access to capability, right? It's just become so available to business and operational groups, right? Generally, it comes back to when, you want those platforms to talk to each other that,
Yeah.
IT's phone will ring. Um, but yeah, it's been an interesting, the ease of access to technology, it's just changed dramatically in the last 10 to 15 years. So
Hmm.
But I think it's something that so many organizations wrestle with is, wow, a lot of neat AI stuff out there. We do not have a large budget to go pursue this or play with it. Um, but a lot of these capabilities are available to organizations of any size. Um, I'm kind of curious, like, how should these companies look at what to go do?
yeah,
And
how do you get started, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's
yeah, just, get rolling, try something out, but something that's valuable as well, not
yeah.
just a shiny toy.
Yeah, and I mean it depends. I mean, we had at Boswick, we were looking at, some very necessary actions we had to take, and new tools played into that. AI tools played into, how we were going to drive capability. But I would advise companies, and I do, look at your data first, right? Start with that. If you have the luxury of time, right, and you're not trying to rush to just get a tool in, make sure your data sound. I can't stress how critical that is because it's the same old adage, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Beyond that, though, to get started is most companies know where their log jams are. They know where their inefficiencies are. They know which workflows aren't doing it for them, right?
Mhm.
Prioritize those and then, go out and explore the market and see if you can assess an impact on, okay, well, if I brought this in, what's it going to do for me? So you got to, define your value proposition in terms of going out and evaluating those options. From there, it's, time, money, and resources. Can you budget for it? Do you have the resources to implement, vendor, internal, et cetera? Probably one of the biggest factors too is assessing, okay, how much change can we absorb inside our organization, right?
Yeah.
Especially, and you mentioned, mindset shift, right? That is such a big piece when you go from doing something in a manual way. And I'll use, we brought Rivalgo in for sales order automation, right? Great AI platform for doing that. And, we had a big pool of CSRs manually entering. Um, and we knew we needed to make a change, not for the sake of efficiency and staff, but in accuracy, right? And making sure that we're able to keep up with the order volume that we have, right? Orders come in, get them picked, get them shipped, right? That's distribution, heart and soul. So, we needed to find ways, and that was, a great option for us to bring in. Um, and we brought them in, I believe, in November, and we've got full adoption internally. But it was a mindset shift, within our teams to go from, no, you don't take this email anymore and go enter it into the ERP, right? It'll get ingested. You review it, and so it was the shift of being an order taker to an order manager is the way I equated it internally, right? Even our branch managers, right, doing orders. I'm like, no, you should be reviewing them and, looking for quality.
Yeah.
That's the shift we've made, and it's been great.
That feels like it's a mental shift of from output to evaluation.
Yeah.
Like how many of these things can I get done in an hour or a day or whatever it is to um I'm gonna let the AI worry about the steady state, but I'm going to focus on how the process runs and then dealing with the exceptions that come up from that steady state.
Yeah, and the benefit, we didn't go into this necessarily looking for, I'll say, other benefits, right? It was very focused on why we were doing it. But the path we're on now is, oh, this is great. We can now develop, a stronger focus in our ISR or inside sales rep pool and upsell, cross-sell, and more cross-functional, type stuff.
Right.
And so that's exactly where we're at right now because we're able to do that. And it's been an enabler.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think the other thing about it, and we talked about this last week, is how do you take the value from the CSR perspective that says, I entered 85 orders today, that's my value, to my value now is evaluating the process. The machine's doing the orders. I don't really care that the machine did 85 orders. They kept up with the flow. Now I can say, what else is going on in the business where I can provide value to? So I
And
think let the
on
AI
top
do
of
the work that the AI does, and let the human do the stuff that the human does.
Yeah, and now we're developing, cross-training matrices, for our CSRs to be able to, help improve their skills because, and it should be the goal of, getting the customer, serviced as quickly as possible.
Right.
If they call in, that they're, getting to somebody who knows what they need. And so, moving into other things, where, customer calls in and, you're, they hit your CRM based on their phone number, their records are there, right? And that technology's been around for a while, but
Yeah.
I would venture to say there's a lot of middle market distributors that probably don't have that, kind of capability. But all that lends into, exactly what you said, evaluating the process, not tasks necessarily.
Yeah, that makes sense. So,
We,
so you
we-
mentioned Revolgo, and I think you also put White Cup in as
Yes.
another. So
Yeah,
the question that a lot of people come up with is, okay, I have this need. I know I need to do it. I want to be able to start to evaluate. How did you go about evaluating what was the right solution for you? What was the mindset? How did you work that within Bostwick?
Yeah, I think the key to any, well, really any vendor evaluation is you want to have a good partner, right? And in terms of support and, the implementation process, and, but there's a piece that I look for is I not only want them to be proficient and experts in data, right? Particularly on an AI platform, but I want them to know our data, right? And understand our structure and our data. And, the industry, or I should say distribution specific options that are out there, be it Rivago, be it White Cup, be it Canals or any other that are out there, and there's plenty of them. The focus they have on distribution goes a long way, I think, in
Mm-hmm.
providing, that level of understanding. For us to go out and say, okay, well, we're going to, bring in a Salesforce or, any other, package that may not have a distribution, mindset and focus, it's a little tougher. So those are key things, I think, in looking at a vendor. And again, not AI specific. I think too, getting more specific on AI vendors. Are they, how do I put this? Do they have tunnel vision, right?
Okay, three more.
And meaning, are they merely focused on getting a task from point A to point Z, right?
Mm.
There's a whole lot that goes on in that journey, right? And so understanding, again, how we operate, you know, and, one distributor to the next, even in the same industrial distribution, right? We're going to do things differently, you know. And so being able to work with you and understanding, your nuances in that journey of that, workflow, to me, that's important. And that has to come across through the evaluation, process. Technically, there's it's kind of interesting in terms of technical evaluations, right? Uh, you're either hosting at Amazon or Google or Micro, wherever you're hosting, right? Um, that's almost something that's taken off the table anymore in evaluation. You don't have to think about that,
Interesting.
right? To a large degree. I mean, you still want to check your boxes. So it really comes down to the capability relevance to the problem you're having in your individual company. Okay. And you talked about getting started, right? For somebody who
Yeah.
has been thinking about this.
A huge question for people. Yeah.
Yeah, if your inefficiency roadblock or logjam is in sales order processing, you might not be ready to go out and look at demand forecasting, right? With AI tools, right? Fix those things. That helps you on your priority, or any kind of RevOps AI, platform. And so, understand, how the solution is solving the problem, that you may have. I'll come back to Rivalgo real quick. They've been a great partner. We brought them in on the sales order automation, but we're looking at their, PO to AP. We're proof of concepting their bid management, offering they have, and that's actually a new line of business. We've never done bids, federal, state, local, you know. So that's an interesting piece that, we're checking out, and, does it have legs? And so we'll see.
Hmm.
But, that's another thing you want, so they can help you figure those things out as well.
Right. So when we think about you've seen multiple rounds of automation. And that's one of the great things from having experience through this. Like, what does AI look like when you think about it in that context of, hey,
Yeah.
we've seen a few evolutions before. Um, how do you look at
Yeah. We all have. Boy, if I was long-winded on a prior answer, I might get even more long-winded on this one. So, yeah, you gotta, think about the waves, of automation. I could go all the way back to the wheel, but maybe we'll start at the 1700s, right? With, the
Probably a good way.
Industrial Revolution, right? So,
Mm.
the advent of steam engine and mechanization of factories for mass production, right? So that, you applying, that type of technology, it's analog, right? Um, created a whole wave of prosperity, right? Quite honestly. Um, you know, the next iteration, was probably mid 1800, by the time Boston Brown was founded, into the early 1900s, with electricity, right? And combustion engines. And that created a whole new change, and leapfrogged both production and distribution, right? How we transport, how we deliver, you know. And if you actually think back during that time frame, you know, that I mentioned Sears early, right? I tend to think of them when I think of first modern distribution models, right? And then vital goods like, lumber and, grain, and how did those things get to where they needed to be? Those were distribution models, back in the day. And all of these changes in technology, you know, produced efficiency gains at each step of the way. And so, the next phase, and this is one where we all probably come into the equation, is, the digital age, right? 50s and up to 2000, I think would probably be the cutoff mark. But, that, brought in a lot of our computers, obviously, right? But even robotics to a level, a whole lot, just in terms of the chip evolution, if you want to call it that, came into being. But I'd say really in the 2000s is where
Mm.
automation really started to kick into high gear, right? And that's where AI kind of was born, if you will, and
Mhm.
in terms of application. Now, I was at a seminar recently. It was an AI seminar, and there was a professor speaking, and he reminded everybody AI has been around since the transistor was developed, in the 40s.
Yeah.
They just didn't have the technology to make it real. Fast forward, here we are, right? So, we get into
it?
the 2000s with cloud computing and big data and, early machine language applications for data mining. And I can tell you, I started at Capital One, you know, um, it- I don't think many people know this, but they got their start because they had an information-based strategy of creating this credit risk spectrum, right?
Mhm.
And going where the banks weren't. Simple as that. But they had a huge data mining algorithm behind them to figure that out, right? Very early AI, premise. So, I think where we're at now is, moving from, kind of task oriented, as we talked about earlier, to, and you guys talked about it in the initial discussion you had in the article, into more cognitive, right? Um, and that's, Brian, I just want to recognize that, your experience with Adobe, you called it a conversation.
Yeah. Yes,
Right?
that's very true. Yeah.
That's significant, so yeah, when you get into more distribution specific, right? Um, things like hydraulic lifts and forklifts and, all that kind of thing in the 60s, all the way up through the 90s when MRPs, were first developed. Um, I don't know if many people know this, but, the term ERP wasn't coined until the 90s. Feels like it's a lot older than that, right? But
That's
no, Gartner coined it in the 90s. And that was just really combining MRP functionality. So Yeah, I think distribution right now is really poised, to start hitting that acceleration curve, right? I think people are moderately moving through the readiness, the evaluation piece of it. Um, but it scales, right? Larger, middle market, smaller guys. So,
I think to me what's amazing about distribution that it may not be widely recognized is distribution is actually one of the best spots for AI. And perhaps that's counterintuitive because distribution is an industry which focuses on moving physical objects. But the thing that's really cool about it is there is a lot of data that is captured throughout that process. The data is also captured in the systems. There's a lot of consistency between each transaction, and there's a lot of consistency of processes in between organizations. So it's like, are there differences? 100%. Are there differences in technology landscapes and processes and whatnot from organization to organization? Yes. But the amount of data that is available and consistent there is unlike most industries out there until you get to other high repeat businesses like FinServe. Uh,
mhm.
so I think distribution is a fantastic application of it. But what we need to see are the right sets of applications that match up against those processes.
Yeah,
And I expect that we're going to see an absolute explosion of those
mhm.
over the next 12 months, just like we've seen an explosion of, that first big spark of no AI native applications to many vendors now rushing into the POAP reconciliation or
Mhm.
entry, bid management, um, and then like to me like in a very fascinating way, we see the logistics industry, which has a lot of the same characteristics, adopting entirely different sets of applications, not because they're better for logistics, but it's just because that's the vendor set that's
Yeah.
started there. So I think it's going to be great when we begin to cross-pollinate in between those industries and take advantage of the amazing data assets this one already has.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on something there that, in distribution, the uh, variety of just processes, right? Between warehouse, marketing, e-commerce, right? Um, you don't see a lot of e-commerce in manufacturing, right?
Right,
They're
right.
selling to distributors. And so, you have these several different areas where, there is definitely opportunity, a part of the strategy that, you know, we're building out, right? And we're very much in our, beginning of this, right? We'll say infancy to toddler stage in terms of AI, but we're very much, putting an AI first approach, right? And it's interesting right now because it's different than when cloud. I do a lot of comparisons back to when cloud came on the scene, right? That was a new wave of, technology change. But, back when cloud came on the scene, you still had a choice at that time of like on-prem, options, and, IT leaders could hug their servers if they wanted to at the time. With AI, you don't have a choice, right? It's embedded, and you can't really have a conversation around any business process or operational process without there being a significant technology component tied to it. And AI is going to be served up on every one of those going forward. So it has to be part of your, strategy, and looking at it. And, to me, AI first is, okay, if you have a capability for your company that needs to be delivered on, you know, then you have to look at that and see what's out there. And that's where mindset shift comes in, right? You can't think the way you used to in terms of, oh, well, I'll just go get a cloud app maybe and that'll do it. Um, and you touched on something a second ago, right? And then it ties back to something I believe I said earlier, is make sure that when you're evaluating these solutions, that they're actually fixing a problem that you have, right?
An amazing journey, Tracy. We really appreciate the fact that you spent so much time with us kind of talking about your journey. And if you want to hear more, Tracy's actually going to be on a panel at our Applied for AI Distributors, along with a couple of other distributors, talking about how do you create an AI-enabled organization. So I'm really looking forward to that part of the conversation. So
Yeah.
as we kind of get to the end of this, though, I promised Brooks that we would ask each other. There's a lot of AI news out there. So Tracy, I'll start with you. Where do you get most of your AI news? What sources do you use?
I think the right answer is AI News and Gurus, right?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Um, yeah, probably the one I go to most, and it's more mainstream, not distribution specific, but is the MIT Technology Review. I've been subscribed to them for a while, and they have a great diversity of, emerging tech and AI specific, news feeds. So
I put that one on my list. I love that one. How about you, Brooks?
I'm a big fan of Ethan Mollick. I think he does a great job of the amount of content he produces. He's a professor at Wharton focused on technology and entrepreneurship. He has a Substack. You can find him on LinkedIn and everywhere else. He has a book, Co-Intelligence. I think he's good at talking about here's AI and here's how it relates to business. Great. Azim Azar does a good job of general purpose technologies, what's going on. Oftentimes, has a little link to all kinds of what the thought leaders in AI are talking about. And then the other is a little bit broader, is I basically have tuned, I don't use X or Twitter or whatnot socially, I really don't care. But I have tuned it to AI news, and that's just been an absolute wealth of information.
Yeah, there's definitely a ton out there on X for sure. Now, I'm the large language model guy. So I've learned how to use these things. And what I've done and what I'm going to share with the audience is a prompt that will allow you to use a ChatGPT or Perplexity, whichever one you're most familiar with. But it's a prompt that will allow you to gather all the AI news that's out in the ether, specifically for wholesale distribution in the last week. And I literally have that set up to run as a task within ChatGPT, and that's a little more advanced, but I'll give you the prompt. You can put it in a large language model. It will bring back to you articles that are relevant to our industry. So that's going to be my gift to you at the end of this, that for joining that prompt. It really does help kind of synthesize a lot of the stuff that's out there into what we do.
I'm
This
a big
podcast comes with a gift bag.
Yeah, and a lollipop for you too, Brooks.
Sorry, Tracy.
Well, this has been great. I appreciate it, guys. And looking forward to the panel discussion in Chicago.
That is going to be awesome. So before we go, we got just a couple more things. I want to make sure everybody is aware of the two new programs or programs that are coming up that are really important. Alex Krzyzewski is going to be talking to us next week about the changing climate with all these tariffs. There's obviously a ton of information going on out there. There's a lot of changes happening to it. And Alex is a perfect resource to talk to us about what's going on with those tariffs. There's already close to 400 people signed up for this webinar. So make sure that you get your seat here, because this is going to be a great way for you to hear what's happening from his perspective on what's going on with the tariffs. And then literally the next day, Dr. Jonathan Bine, who, by the way, reminds us all the time that AI started back when he got his PhD in AI, will be doing the state of CRM and analytics. So two really action-packed, informational-packed episodes at 2 points next week. So make sure you join those. I appreciate the time today. Tracy, again, thanks for your time. Brooks, my friend, we will talk to you very soon. And I'm going to come visit you in Austin.
Woo!
Appreciate it, guys.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.